Good morning, boys and girls. Welcome to our history lesson. Today we're going to be exploring some explorers. So, by the end of the lesson, we are going to have a good idea about six explorers. I say six, I would argue four and two other, let's call them gentlemen. Um, you might disagree with me and say there's six explorers, but I suppose we can find that out as we go along. So, welcome, and let's get, well, exploring, I suppose. Right, welcome, brave explorers. We have a map of the world here, as you can see. Um, I wonder, can you name the places that the arrows are pointing to there? Maybe some of them are pointing, you can see there's some sneaky arrows hiding over here and move. Down the bottom, the very bottom. My computer's not. There we go. Down the very bottom. Okay, I'm asking you to prove you know where those places are. You can, of course, use Google Maps. I said if you're not a real explorer, you can use atlases, or if you know it off the top of your head, that's even better. Again, so if you could make a list of those in your copy and send them to me, guys, that would be terrific. Okay, back to we're not really talking about explorers of today bravely using Google Maps or atlases to find our things, or even back when we were able to go to Lanzarote, doesn't really count as exploring back when that was a thing. So what we're going to look at is what explorers would have known in the past. If we transported you in the past, you might know this much of the map. No, I got that wrong. There we go. That's more like it. So yeah, you can imagine if you were back in the past and you were just an average person living in Enfield a long time ago, you really wouldn't know much of the world, and you wouldn't know much of the world because it didn't come up in your everyday life. Maps were something that were really hard to make because I mean it meant people having to go around the very edge of countries, and they'd be naturally very inaccurate. And you wouldn't really need a map for most of the things you do in your life. So maybe you might have seen, you might know that Ireland is there and the UK, England is beside us, and Scotland and Wales, and maybe France is somewhere close by. But in terms of knowing where they are on maps, that mightn't really be a thing for the vast majority of people. Okay, so you were lucky and you went to school. Maybe you were a bit like Tom Crean and you were working in the Navy and you sailed to different places. Um, you would know maybe a bit more of the map. You'd know obviously Europe, because that would be the most extensively travelled, and North Africa, places like that. You've heard about these places in China, Southeast Asia, India, all these things, but you wouldn't really know them very well. You know they're there, but even if you were looking at a map of them, it'd be quite fuzzy. You wouldn't know exactly. And what was down below South Africa, people didn't really travel much there, so you can imagine you wouldn't have known it. And again, in Central Asia, where things become very cold in the middle of Russia, you know it exists. Something is here, probably. Um, so yeah, this is yeah essentially what you know. Say you want to become wealthy, you're living here in Spain. You want to import some tea from China. Um, well, how do you get there? Well, you could travel across land, but because for religious reasons and a variety of different reasons, the countries here might hate you. You might find it really hard to get there. You could go the land route, across through Russia and down into China, but it's absolutely freezing here in Siberia, and you're not really sure what maybe turn right at the Gobi Desert and a quick left back to China. So it's a long journey to be traveling. It's not very safe. So I guess it's time to, if you want some tea and some yummy spices from over here in the east, you are going to have to do some exploration. So it's time to do some exploring. Okay, our first person that we're going to be taking a look at today is Christopher Columbus. Likely a lot of you have heard of him in the past. Columbus had the idea that, well, I can sail west rather than I can't get across east because of all these countries here that hate me and because Russia is so big and so cold. Well, I'll just take a shortcut and go west. He believed that he would just come out the other side. He believed the globe was smaller than it was. He didn't know about the existence of the Americas. When I say the Americas, I mean North and South America. So, um, Columbus made it to the Caribbean. He sailed across the Atlantic Ocean. Very brave at the time to sail across the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, it's a huge body of water, and people weren't used to those long boat journeys, especially across the Atlantic Ocean, which we know is a very rough ocean. He landed here in the Caribbean, and he did some traveling around, but he believed he was landing over here in Indonesia and all these islands in China. So he believed that he was sort of in the Indies. So he called the people he met here Indians. Yeah, so that is Columbus, and he made a few trips over and back before dying over there. Um, that is Christopher Columbus. Um, so then, a little bit later, this gentleman, Amerigo Vespucci, did some traveling as well, and he realized that America wasn't in the Indies. He said, these people are too different from what I've read about people in the Indies. This must be a new place. This can't be Asia. This is a new continent. And America gets its name from him, Amerigo Vespucci. So America. There. Okay, so yeah, tea hasn't stopped being yummy. So that was sort of a realization that they had discovered something new. Suddenly, a map is opening out for us. We can see much more of it here because more of the world has been discovered. Okay, so this is the two gentlemen I was talking about. We have Hernan Cortez and Francisco Pizarro. So Hernan Cortez, we actually mentioned him when we were studying about the Aztecs. So Cortez was a ruthless Spanish explorer who conquered and destroyed the Aztec Empire in Mexico. Essentially, he sailed up with his army of conquistadors, which are soldiers or conquerors, and they had steel weapons and guns, and they explored this area of Central America and what would nowadays be Mexico. And he essentially destroyed their population, um, stole their gold, brought it back to Spain. I don't think that counts as an explorer. I mean, yes, he did go to places that no one from Europe had ever been before. I'm not sure explorer is the right word though. Likewise with Pizarro, he went and discovered northern Peru here at the Incas, and again, perhaps even worse in terms of stealing their gold and silver, forcing the people who lived there into slavery, and yeah, just generally not a nice person. So I said, if going new places and stealing gold, and murdering people counts as exploring, we are explorers too. I wouldn't consider them explorers, but maybe you do, which is good stuff. So they discovered lots of South America and Central America there. Discovered, again, might be explored, might be better. Okay, Vasco da Gama. So he decided, okay, with this whole going west to get to China and India, it's not going to work. The America's in the way and it's too big. There's water on one side of Africa and water on the other side. So maybe I'll be able to go all the way around it. This was a pretty big and brave idea. People knew that there was huge storms down at the bottom of South Africa, so or that there would be. So going on this huge journey took a lot of bravery. It says water on both sides of Africa. What if I sailed around it? This gentleman here says, "What if you can't?" And ha, told you so. So he got around the what's it called, the Cape of Africa, and he called that the Cape of Good Hope. First, he wanted to call it the Cape of Storms because of how bad the storms were there. Multiple times he tried to get around this point in Africa, and storms blew him back. So he wants to call it the Cape of Storms, but he kind of, with a bit of help from his friends, got decided to call it the Cape of Good Hope. So, and that allowed him to sail around to India and become very, very wealthy, trading with spice merchants and things like that. Because spices, the reason why I say yummy spices, yes, spices are yummy, but they're also really, really valuable back then because food was so plain and it went rotten very quickly. So you could preserve food with spices. So obviously something really, really valuable when he brought it back to Europe to sell. Okay, that is Vasco da Gama. So he discovered a route from Europe to India around Africa. Our next guy said, well, if you can get around Africa, the Cape of Africa, maybe it's possible to get around South America. So this is Ferdinand Magellan, Portuguese explorer, led to the first expedition that sailed around the world. Unfortunately, he died before completing his journey. So you have him here saying, "I will sail around the world. Your crew might, your ships might. You, hey, what's that skull on the map?" Hmm. Okay, so he set out on his journey from Spain. He went south down to South America. He stopped over in Brazil. I believe he stopped over in what's now Rio de Janeiro. He landed there in January, so Janeiro, January, and he sailed on around. Again, he had a lot of tough time getting around the Cape of, I think this is called Cape Horn here in South America. And there he was one of the first people, first European people to see puffins and penguins and things like that on his journey. Came around across the Pacific Ocean here, and he called it the Pacific Ocean because it was so passive. There weren't very strong waves and wind to make his boat go faster, so they called it the Pacific Ocean. It took him a long time to get across, but eventually he came out the other side and landed in Indonesia. And while helping some locals, trying to convert them to Christianity, he was killed. At that point, his crew sailed on back home, back around the Cape of Good Hope that Vasco da Gama discovered, and back home to Portugal. So that is Ferdinand Magellan. And as you can see, guys, the world has suddenly become much better mapped because of these explorers. So, thanks to these explorers, parts of the world were explored for Europeans. Obviously, people already lived there, but I suppose from a European perspective, they were explored. As you can see, there's still a bit to go. So we have Australia's hiding down here, and Antarctica, while it was seen, was never properly explored. We'll take a look at those in future lessons, or in future lessons in the next lesson. So yeah, we've come a long way from knowing this part of the world to knowing pretty much all of the world there, except for those maybe two or three places that are still hiding in the darkness for us there. So my challenge for you guys is, I'd like you to choose at least one. Oopsie daisies. Choose at least one explorer here, and write a minimum of 3 facts about them. If you want to do more, you can. And you can use World Book Online Kids is a great place to do it. If you want to use other places too, that's absolutely fine. I have some links for you there, which I will post up on Seesaw, which you can click into them and have a quick read about each of these. Well, 4 of these gentlemen. No, maybe a lot of them are gentlemen. Actually, Columbus also did a lot of murdering of native people. These men, and you can learn a bit more about them. Hopefully you enjoyed that, guys, and hopefully I will see good work from your research about these explorers. Slán, say Slán. Slán.